And now, an audiovisual presentation, presented by Squad Entertainment Inc. Scooby-Doo and the gang have been through a lot over the past 50 years. Some good, some bad, some that I hold dear to my heart personally, and some that I never really got into. But one thing that Scooby-Doo has always been is a mystery. An easy-to-solve mystery? Sometimes. A mystery with no indication of the twist at all? Okay, maybe once or twice. So why then does Scoob throw all of that away? Why change genres? Just for an old 70s reference. Look, I've been watching Scooby-Doo since I was probably 6 or 7. I mean, all-day marathons of Where Are You, Scooby-Doo, the new Scooby-Doo movies, and What's New, Scooby-Doo. So it's safe to say that this set of characters is one that I hold dear to my heart. Even now, I love watching the show. Even if it is formulaic, goofy, and predictable, it's always going to get a laugh or two. However, I grew up in the early 2000s, so I saw some of the old cartoons, but just the big name ones. Flintstones, Yogi Bear, the Jetsons, Huckleberry Hound, and of course, Scooby-Dooby-Doo, which I just realized now, at the age of 18, Scooby's middle name is definitely a drug reference. But anyways, I was unfamiliar with Dynamite or Dick Dastardly, and henceforth had no nostalgia when they appeared in this movie. But I don't think that missing nostalgia really took from my enjoyment of this film. In fact, I quite like this movie, just not as a Scooby-Doo movie. So today I'll be taking a look in the enjoyable and fun, yet underwhelming movie that was Scoob. Without further ado, whatever ado is, Scoob Unscripted. I don't wanna do my own horn, but I'm super good at writing music. We once again find ourselves heading to Plotland to recap the plot of Scoob. So if you haven't seen this film yet, or just lived somewhere where this film is still unavailable, be warned, there will be light spoilers ahead for the first 2 acts, but nothing overly major. So, I guess we should probably begin where any self-respecting Scooby-Doo movie begins. The beginning. Shaggy and Scooby become friends, they go trick-or-treating, and a rude group of bullies steals Shaggy and Scooby's candy, throwing it into a haunted house. We are then introduced to a young Fred, Daphne, and Velma, who help the cowardly Shaggy and Scooby retrieve their candy. They enter the haunted house to find a ghost, who turns out to be a man in a mask. Insert a classic Scooby-Doo villain catchphrase, and the 5 agree to do this again. They grow up via Scooby-Doo theme song and end up trying to expand the business of Mystery Inc. Simon Cowell tells Scooby and Shaggy they're useless, so they get attacked by robots and abducted by the Blue Falcon, who turns out to be the Blue Falcon's kid, Brian. They then get chased by Rick, and the other 3 go to investigate Scooby and Shaggy's disappearance. While the Blue Falcon and his crew try to track down ancient skulls, Rick kidnaps Fred, Daphne, and Velma. Daphne befriends one of Rick's robots, Vacuum Face, as Shaggy and Scooby grow apart. Scooby and the Blue Falcon fight a small Harry Tracy Morgan for the last skull, but Rick tricks Shaggy into helping him steal the skull and Scooby-Doo. Fred, Daphne, and Velma reunite with Shaggy and the Blue Falcon's crew, and they go to save Scooby, who is forced to open a gate of doom, since he is the last relative of Alexander the Great's dog? What the heck is happening? What? That can't be the plot of this movie. What? Okay, Cerebrus unleashes havoc, and the gang stops him, and Rick saving the day. And they all learn that friendship is the most important hero of them. What was this movie? What? Okay, I guess now is as good a time as ever for me to say, this movie was not a Scooby-Doo movie in my eyes. It has Scooby-Doo, It has Shaggy, it has Fred, it has Daphne, it has Velma a little bit. But it's not a Scooby-Doo movie. A Scooby-Doo movie has one thing. Well, it has a couple things it needs to be a Scooby-Doo movie. One, it needs at least most of your Mystery Incorporated gang. I know there are some iterations of Scooby-Doo where Velma's not there, or, whatever. But it needs a mystery gang. Typically that is Velma, Shaggy, Fred, Daphne, and Scooby-Doo. That's pretty much the fan favorites of the Scooby gangs, but I mean, I can go for a little bit of Scrappy-Doo here and there. Personally, I have nothing against the character. I've always loved him. But anyway, Scrappy-Doo is not necessary for this movie. Scrappy-Doo is not the reason this movie doesn't work. The other thing you need for a good Scooby-Doo movie is some sort of mystery. Whether that be more supernatural, like Scooby-Doo has kind of started to lean towards in the past couple of years, or classic Man in a Mask, like the original 60s and 70s Scooby-Doo. But anyway, so not only does this movie remove half of the mystery gang from most of the movie, I mean, Fred, Daphne, and Velma barely do anything.
What do we do?
Maybe he wants a Scooby snack!
I don't have any Scooby snacks.
I always have a spare.
Sorry.
And that's why I always have a spare. Scooby!
I'm so weak.
I don't understand why they chose to sideline these characters. But I think the biggest reason this movie does not feel like a Scooby-Doo movie is because it doesn't have a mystery behind it. You as the audience aren't trying to figure anything out alongside the characters. You're just along for the action ride, which is fine for some movies. I'm not saying every movie you have to be trying to piece together everything, but it's Scooby-Doo. You have to have some sort of mystery there to make it work. And, I mean, without that, you left an action movie with Scooby-Doo in it. So yeah, that's my biggest issue, is this movie doesn't feel like a Scooby-Doo movie. And I know a lot of people didn't like this movie for other reasons. A lot of people say the plot is cliche, and where they're not entirely wrong. I think the plot is fine. I enjoyed the actual story of this movie, and if this movie had entirely new characters that we never met before, I think I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more. And I honestly don't think I would have that big of an issue with this movie. I don't think I'd be talking about this movie right now. But I guess before I go any farther, I do wanna clarify. I try not to see or look at reviews for this movie before recording, because I wanted to keep my own opinion, like mine. But it's been a couple weeks now since the movie came out, and inevitably I saw a few reviews. So I will acknowledge some of the things I've seen, but I think most of my viewpoints have kind of stayed the same. But I guess if we want to talk back more about the plot, it is very one note. It's like the whole plot is basically friendship will rule them all. That's Lord of the Rings thing. Not friendship, but anyway, friendship is like, the key to saving the day or whatever, and it's very, it's very cliche and it's very like heavy-handed, but I think it's a kids movie and I'm willing to give it a bit more leniency. Maybe I shouldn't be willing to do that, but I've always been a bit more lenient with kids movies. So I didn't have a problem with the plot. I didn't have a problem with the characters. I know some people as well said Shaggy didn't really act like Shaggy, and where that's not entirely wrong, I didn't even remotely think about that until much later on. My biggest problem with the characters is Scooby. Scooby snacks in this franchise, or in this film, I guess, are human treats and not dog snacks, which doesn't seem like a huge deal, It's not a huge deal, but it's just a little something that I kind of am disappointed in, because one of my favorite, like, jokes as a kid in Scooby-Doo is Shaggy is eating dog treats. Like, he is excited. He will do something for a dog treat. He will do something he was absolutely terrified of if he can get a dog treat.
Too bad. This Scooby snack smells delicious.
A Scooby snack?
Which is absolutely hilarious to me, and like still now I laugh at that. But my other little pet peeve about this movie, before I go back into my bigger issues, which are, I mean, still not as, my biggest issue was there's no mystery, but now I'm kind of rambling. Scooby's name in this movie is officially Scooby-Doo, and in most of the other projects or films, I guess, that Scooby-Doo has been a part of, I'm pretty sure it's been canon that his name is technically Scoobert-Doo, and they don't even reference Scoobert in this movie, and that's so upsetting to me because I love the name Scoobert. But anyway, I digress. Back to slightly bigger issues. We talked about the plot. I probably could go into the plot a little bit more, but again, I think for the most part, it's a standard action kids film. And I think it works. I think it's enjoyable, and I think it's fine. So let's talk about the whole Blue Falcon, Rick Dastardly, Captain Caveman situation. This movie, if you weren't aware, was made by Warner Brothers, the same people who made the DC movies, the Justice League, your Man of Steel. And if you haven't seen those DC movies, I'll actually talk about that in my next episode, the Unscripted podcast, where it's a mess, and they tried making this expanded universe like the Marvel one, but they tried rushing it out there to get fans and seats to go see these characters interact with each other, and in the process, they screwed up all the things that make the Marvel universe work. And I don't want to get into this too much. It's obviously been covered a lot. I feel like I've heard this conversation a million times. But they threw all these characters into one movie, where they all had like 20, 30 seconds of screen time, or they weren't relevant, they didn't need to be there. And this movie doesn't learn from the mistakes that Warner Brothers has already made. Warner Brothers actually doubles down, it feels, on their mistakes, because instead of just referencing the Flash in Batman v Superman, now they have a whole action scene around Captain Caveman, and they have, I didn't know this, this is actually my second recording of this, and what I didn't realize until after I started animating is there are toys of Captain Caveman from this movie that were easier for me to find than toys of Fred, Daphne, and Velma. That should not. It's a movie about Scooby-Doo. I should not be. Captain Caveman was in this movie for less than those three. I know that is actually saying a lot, but why is he in this movie? Why are they so heavily focusing on him? I understand trying to slowly build this universe, and I don't think the Blue Falcon one was entirely out of place. I didn't realize the Blue Falcon was a classic character until entirely after I saw the movie. Same with Captain Caveman. Rick Dastardly, I think I definitely recognized his dog, so I must have seen him around, but I didn't truly know that character, and I'm sure most of the kids who saw this movie didn't know any of them. But it's weird to see them trying to, like, heavy-handedly out the gate start this universe, and then disrespect the actual story at hand so blatantly. Obviously, again, I've said I like the plot, but we have to remember this is a Scooby-Doo movie, and they're disrespecting the character and the franchise of Scooby-Doo by not making this a mystery, in my opinion. So even if this movie was to introduce new people, new children to Scooby-Doo, which I'll talk about in a minute, um, they're not really introducing Scooby-Doo. They're introducing a talking dog who shares appearance and voice and name with the real Scooby-Doo, because Scooby-Doo is a mystery show or movie or whatever you're referencing, and this isn't. So it's not. You're not really introducing kids to a Scooby-Doo movie. You're introducing them to these characters, which I personally don't like. But I want to talk about this whole introduction thing because I'm not entirely positive, and I know it hasn't been confirmed or anything, that this was like trying to introduce Scooby-Doo to a new audience. But I feel like you didn't need to do that. Again, obviously, I'm a bit older than the kids this was probably aimed for, but I grew up in the early 2000s. I don't think there was a Scooby-Doo show on then. I mean, sure, there were the live-action movies around the time I was born. But I mean, I remember 2007, 2008, Boomerang would air literally 12 hours of Scooby-Doo content a day. And that's not an exaggeration. You would wake up, and from 8 o'clock a.m. to 8 o'clock p.m., they would be airing classic Scooby-Doo, What's New Scooby-Doo, the new Scooby-Doo movies. I watched a little bit of Be Cool Scooby-Doo. Wait, that can't be right. What was the other one I listed? I don't remember. What's New Scooby-Doo and the new Scooby-Doo movies are the big ones I remember. And like I would watch those all the time. And those weren't new. And since then there's been new Scooby-Doo content. There's been Cartoon Network had a show in probably 2013 or 14. I mean, how much younger do you get? I feel like Scooby-Doo is a universally known character and franchise. And again, I don't know what kids watch now. Obviously, I don't know. Scooby-Doo probably wasn't like the thing of my generation, but I mean, my age group still knew him, and we still talked about him occasionally, and we still talked about that show occasionally. And I feel like this isn't introducing anyone to the character, or at least not a large group of people. So I don't know if that was the purpose of this movie. I don't think it did it right, but also I don't think it needed to be done. But I do want to say, obviously, I said I like this movie. I like the plot. I thought it was very funny at times. I thought most of the jokes landed, and I thought all the actors did a great job. Watching the trailer, I was kind of scared that the actors didn't really sound like the characters. And I'm very upset that Matthew Lillard didn't get asked to be back on, as well as the rest of the cast. But I think the new cast did a good job with the characters, and I know Shaggy in particular, during most of the trailers, I thought was weird, but by the time I actually got around to the movie, I didn't have a problem with him, or his voice. But I think the pinnacle of this movie, the greatest part of this movie, is the beginning. When they're still kids, into that theme song was great, and then they show up with Simon Cowell, and it all starts going downhill pretty quickly. And even at first, like, I thought there was going to be a mystery, so I started piecing together what I thought it would be, and I had a few theories, and I think one of them even has a little bit of evidence to back it up, but I mean, the beginning felt like classic Scooby-Doo. It felt like the characters were named after, or modeled after, a pup named Scooby-Doo cartoon, and it looked great. I love the animation of this one, by the way. But I thought it looked great, and it felt like a classic, like, opening to a Scooby-Doo, like a movie where it's like, okay, we solved this first mystery together, and it explains some of these characters, like, backgrounds, some of these characters being Shaggy and Scooby, I guess. And then they run through the theme song, which I felt very nostalgic for. And I was rewatching to start animating this, and I thought it was I still think it's great. Obviously, I didn't. I wish they would have played the original song, but it wasn't bad by any means. I just, it would have been more nostalgic for me. Um, but I love that transition from like them being young to them being old through the theme song. I thought that was really cool. And I thought it was really not. I don't know about clever, but I thought it was really interesting. Maybe that's not the right word either, but I really liked it. Um, but yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things about this movie I did like. Um, Again, I didn't hate the characters of Blue Falcon or Dynamite. I thought they felt a little bit forced at times to just be there. Especially Rick Dastardly, and obviously now I realize that was because they're trying to put in all these old characters. But I think like overall these characters are fine. Ken Jeong and uh Mark Wahlberg do great jobs voicing them. Um, my one big complaint about the Blue Falcon is he's not the original Blue Falcon that people who would have watched the Blue Falcon or the Dynamite show or cartoon would have grown up with. It's the Blue Falcon's large adult son, is how the movie phrases it. And like that's not inherently a problem, but it's just a weird addition. I don't know why, because at first I thought uh, Rick Dastardly was the original Blue Falcon, and that was like the mystery behind it. It was gonna be the unmasking. And like there's a little bit of evidence I think to support this. In when Fred, Daphne, and Velma are in Rick Dastardly's secret room, there's a little poster on the ground of the original Blue Falcon, and I thought in the end battle when Mark Wahlberg's Blue Falcon, Brian, was about to go call his dad, that like Rick Dastardly's phone was about to ring. That's less so evidence and more just what I thought was going to happen, I guess. But I think I think it was a very decent theory. And then they never did anything with it. They never did anything with the mystery aspect at all, which is really like the crux of what I keep going back to when I think about this movie. Is it just wasn't Scooby-Doo, but I think it just felt kind of pointless to make the Blue Falcon's son. Uh, and like it had a little bit to do, like it kind of lended toward the plot, but I feel like you could have written with just normal Blue Falcon and been fine. Um, and like then there's also a whole relationship between Dynamite and Brian. And they like refuse to work together. I don't know. I thought it was all kind of unnecessary and shouldn't have been focused on as much as it was. Um, but I mean, yeah, that's most of what I have to talk about this movie. Hey guys, quick addition, real quick. It's actually the second one I'm recording. I entirely, I want to talk about real quick the whole Scooby-Doo is the great grand dog of Alexander the Great's dog. It, why? Why? Please give me a reason, movie. Like, I get they needed a reason for Scooby to be important to open the door, but it just felt random. It feels random, and I'm pretty positive that in other Scooby-Doo TV shows or films or whatever, Scooby is officially a an alien dog or an alien in the shape of a dog. I don't know. I was just watching YouTube and I saw that. And like I watched the video, but I never watched that show, so I don't know. I think it was Mystery Incorporated. Um, but if that's already established in your universe, even if these aren't the same universe, you could have just stolen that, and it might feel random to people who don't know that. But if it makes sense to the fans who do, and I think that would have you were like, oh, he can open the dog because he's an alien dog, or he can open the door. I mean, I think that would have been a lot more fitting, and it would have made a lot more sense. And instead of just throwing in Scooby-Doo is an ancestor to Alexander the Great stock randomly. Um, I don't know why that would be. I I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, back to the video. Overall, I think I enjoyed it, and I would be curious to see a second one. I'd be curious to see a sequel, but I don't I don't need it by any means. I could always go back and watch the cartoons. I can always go back and watch the first live action movie. Um, and there's nothing about this movie that made me need to see Scoob 2. Um, but if they make Scoob 2, which as of recording this, I don't think has been confirmed by anything, um, I would definitely be down to see it, and hopefully it fixes some of the mistakes of this movie. Hopefully it has Fred, Daphne, and Velma in the main light again. Um, oh, I almost forgot entirely. I also want to talk real quick. This is, again, a minor pet peeve, kind of like the Scoobert thing. Fred never sets a trap in this movie, and that is about 50% of his personality. Um, because these characters are very one-dimensional. Fred was the leader, Daphne was the damsel in distress. Velma was a smart one, and Scooby and Shaggy always kind of accidentally caught the guy, even though they were terrified. Um, and I mean, that works in a mystery setting when it's the same formula every time. But when you take those characters and you pull them out, you start removing a lot of those aspects of those characters, and you're left with an even like weaker character. And I mean, this movie kind of plays around with that. Um, obviously they make Fred the leader and Velma the smart one, but they kind of play around with their personalities a little bit, which I'm okay with. Obviously, these characters were, they're very one dimensional, but I don't know. I think it is necessary to at least have Fred reference a trap. And it's the same. I don't believe Velma ever says Jinkies in this movie. I know Jinkies is said because I know Fred says it. But that is Velma's thing, and I feel like Velma could have said it, and Fred could have referenced a trap, and it would have felt more like Scooby-Doo. Obviously, it wouldn't have felt like Scooby-Doo because it's still not a mystery, but I feel like, you know, again, those are very minor pet peeves. I feel like I talked for a long time about my minor pet peeves in this, but I guess now is the part of the show where I head over to a review podium and I give this movie a review. So our first category on our review podium is plot, which I'm going to give a 3 out of 5, because obviously it is still a little bit cliche and it's a little bit one note. But I think overall the plot was good. It was enjoyable. It didn't ever really feel that boring, in my opinion at least. But it wasn't perfect by any means either, so 3 out of 5. Respect to the source material, our second category. I'm gonna give this a 1 out of 5 because obviously, I think the beginning was pretty respectful to how Scooby-Doo was and like these characters, and then I think throughout the movie, it is still like respectful to who these characters are, but I think the actual, how do I want to put this? I think the actual mystery not being there was very disrespectful, and obviously I think throwing in like superheroes and splitting up the gang isn't necessarily super respectful. And I'm not saying you can't ever like split up the gang or add extra characters. I have very fond memories of watching Scooby-Doo and Batman. So I mean, you gotta obviously play around with the formula a little bit, but when it's your reintroduction to these characters, then you should probably try and be pretty faithful to how these characters were. That's a big reason I think the first live action movie works, and the second one too. It doesn't have Scrappy-Doo in it, so I'll always think it's not as good. But I think the first one works so well because it is a modern for the time. It is kind of more of a modern take on Scooby-Doo, but it's also very faithful to Scooby-Doo, and it's very faithful to, oh, it's a monster, and even though it is aliens and sun demons or whatever, um, it's still, they're trying to solve the mystery of this island. They're trying to unmask the villain who, I think overall that is a much more faithful first movie than this. Um, so 1 out of 5. For entertainment, which is a category I've chosen to repeat from last time, um, I'm going to give a 4 out of 5. I think this movie was super entertaining. I laughed at quite a bit of the jokes. Maybe not every joke, but I thought most of this landed. I thought most of the actors did a great job. I thought the animation was great. And like it'll definitely keep you entertained. And if this is supposed to entertain kids, it'll almost 100% entertain children. And then our last category is Warner Brothers learning from their mistakes. And for this category, I'm going to give this movie a negative 2 out of 5 because they've actually doubled down on how they don't know what they're doing and how they shouldn't be allowed to make cinematic universes. Shoot, when I was talking about plot, I wanted to add something to my unscripted. Anyway, I'll listen to it in post and I'll add it, I guess. Real quick. How do I get this out on take? Real quick addition, I forgot to rank the movies, and this movie's better than Alpha and Omega, and that was just went without saying, but I needed to say it. So, this movie, 1, Alpha and Omega Holiday Adventure 2, that's all. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you guys for watching and sticking around to the end. Let me know in the comments what you want to see me do next. As I mentioned already, next Thursday's episode of the Unscripted podcast is actually going to be on the Snyder Cut and my opinions on that, which was actually recorded maybe a week and a half ago now. So I talk about this being the next episode, which is not, and I'll explain that again before you get into that episode. But that was recorded early, and then I moved it around because I watched Space Force, and I thought Space Force needed to be talked about. But anyway, if you want to see more of this type of content, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Exodus Comics, and on DeviantArt at Exodus Comics Official, where me and my friend Jack, who runs this channel with me, we write superhero stories. They're all free, and we actually put effort into the writing and illustrating, which, unlike this show, so it definitely is better. But yeah, if you like this, you can go check that out. And if not, I'll see you next week, hopefully. Thanks, and have a great... Goodbye.